Good morning. It is 10:30 a.m. It's just after 10:30 a.m. It is Sunday morning, and that means it is time for Sunday Club, a weekly Ruby on Rails live stream where each week we stream some Ruby on Rails and we build an app together. And at the moment, the app that we are working on is a ticketing and event registration application that's going to allow people to register in groups. We're still pretty early on with our application because we only work on it once a week. So progress is a little slow, but hopefully each week we get a little chance to show people what I'm working on. And some people might be interested in that. So let's dive straight in. I don't think we have any follow-up. I think we are picking up straight where we left off. And I have titled this stream adding some view components. So let's get straight into it. There's no follow-up. Let's just jump straight in. Okay, so why are we taking a look at view components? One, because we've already picked them for the front end, so it's time to do some front end logic now that we got our attendee model set up so that it was being created every time you purchase a ticket through an order model. The second reason I want to take a look at it is that I listened to a podcast, which I will put the link to in the YouTube description. So let me go and find that now, actually. I'm just doing that off screen, so don't panic if you can't see anything. Yeah, so it was, I think the podcast was from a little while ago. I'll just pop link in YouTube. If you are watching this on Twitch, yep, it's in the YouTube video description. If you're watching this on Twitch ever, you can take a look at the YouTube channel and all the archives are there, any relevant links and stuff like that. Just look for Sunday Club, SUNDAE Club on YouTube. And the podcast was with Joel. I've just closed the tab. Joel Hawksley, who is the maintainer of ViewComponent. And it was really great. Actually, it was just an overview of the sort of why for ViewComponent, their approach to it, how they use it at GitHub. They talk quite a lot about a comparison with React and how GitHub uses React alongside ViewComponent. They sort of have areas of code of both apparently, and super interesting. So I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of just triggered in my mind. It'd be a good thing to look at this week. Plus, I haven't finally, as usual, got around to doing the user interface design. So we may as well try and build out some of the user interface, even though we don't know what it necessarily is going to look like, or we can do the design of the browser because as I say every week on the stream, we don't really have much of a plan. We're just sort of fumbling our way through. We're not doing all of the best practice stuff of anything like planning what we're going to do next. We're just going to fumble through. So let's take a look. So we've got an app, and it's not got much in it. So let's find some candidates. I was giving this some thought. Let's find some candidates for what would be good view components. So there's like test 1, 2, 3. So we can start to build ourselves a framework like for view components before we even need to worry about specifically how they look, because we can kind of do that almost as we go. So let's take a look. We've got our homepage here, which has nothing on it. So we could do with some sort of user interface here. Is that going to use view component? Could we just, it's kind of more of a static one-off page perhaps, so maybe we don't need view component all the way through. We could just have a couple sprinkled through maybe. I'm thinking of like a site header, so with a login option or a log out option, and obviously the logic there would need to be like, do we have a user? If we do, what type of user are they? Do we need to show them the admin area? What links do they see? All of those fun things that you'd often get in what type of navigation do they have? All of that fun stuff, which could be pretty good to answer, and hopefully fairly straightforward logic to add to initial view components. So we then have our admin area. So we then have some sort of sub navigation for these, because at the moment I'm just going straight to events, but presumably within admin, which we don't even have right now, you need to have some sort of navigation. Like, what does it look like to move through the admin area? Again, we'd need some sort of navigate, like site header navbar thing. Does that switch to include all the admin navigation when you're in admin, as opposed to all of the other stuff. So some of the stuff I was looking to touch on in the UI design stream, but we haven't got to that yet. So we can just start to build it. Like let's why not? It's the stream. We haven't got a plan. Let's go do it. A footer is probably a good, like admin footer versus site footer. We can also look. We have these public pages for the events. Well, we might want a component here that contained this ticket, and maybe the component is aware of whether the event is on sale or not, like whether you can buy a ticket. And so what are we actually passing through to these? These are just some of the ideas I came up while I was giving it 10 minutes of thought the other day while I was listening to that podcast. I think the header and the navigation is probably a good place to start because it's so generic. We can decide whether we want a different one for admin. I mean, to be honest, we're in admin so much. Maybe that's the one we start with and sort of go from there. I haven't tidied up the previous branch, which I know I said we were always going to get into the danger of having these massive branches, and we now have a massive branch. But I don't really want to do that on the stream because it's boring. Not that I said this stream wouldn't be boring. That is not a promise I've ever made. But I just don't feel like doing it on a Sunday morning. But it's getting, oh no, I have to rebase that down into something sensible. It's sort of, I mean, I'll do it per stream, I think, like I did the last ones. So everything down here is nice and tidy. And I'll try and be like one stream equals a set of commits. And I'll go back and look at what they were. So I don't think I'm going to be too worried about that. That's really long. It's really long. Okay, fine. That's just some admin for me. Maybe on a nice this Sunday afternoon. We do have a hard stop today. We are aiming to stop around 12ish because I've got to go to my sister's house. So let's, what have we got in here? We've got one uncommitted thing. Okay, so that was to show the attendee information within an order. I haven't got any tests around that within that view component, although they're just display. There's no logic there, so that we can probably actually commit that. Let's just put it in as a whip commit so that I know to review it. Add attendee information. I wonder how that isn't breaking at the moment because we have orders without attendees. How is order.attendee not breaking? Or order.attendee.name not breaking is like a, whatever, who cares? We don't worry about it. Add attendee information to order view component. This was just to see whether attendee code was working to review whether we need this during the rebase. Little note to myself. Hopefully this afternoon, but I sense many, many days from now. All right, cool. So everything's committed. We know what we've got. Well, let's make a new branch anyway. So we're going to branch off a branch again. Not a good idea. Just not a good idea. I'm just going to call it adding view components. Yeah, I don't know what we're going to do. All right. Okay, so let's consider everything in there done. Just needing a rebase. We're on a new branch off of that branch, and we'll figure it out from there. How much of a plan do we want to put together for this? And how much do we just want to sort of wing it? Let's wing it. What's the worst that can happen? Let's just totally wing it. So I guess what I mean by putting a plan together is naming stuff, because we're bound to back ourselves into some corners here. So we've got components, admin. So everything we've got at the moment within components is inside admin. So we've got attendees, events, and orders, and they're all basically the same set of components, which is one is a list, which wraps a bunch of list items, and then they're prefixed with the name of the type of list item. So we have the models we have in the system are events, orders, and attendees mainly. And so we've got an order list component and an order list item component. So, and this is literally just a wrapper around the other one. And it's so that we could add in formatting, pagination, any, whatever, any stuff we wanted. So I guess if we say we want, it'd be really, is there like it would be really good if there was a view component, like, set of libraries. No, you can't have libraries because they're too specific, but like resources, here we go. Is there like, here we go. This is what I was looking for, kind of set of existing components. Okay, so these are more like utility ones, tab, nav, tab, panelist, text. So this is sort of like, show you the actual behavior of any of these. Border box. Oh, view storybook. Okay, so you can build a storybook with them. That's pretty cool. Oh, okay. Can we, do we want to reuse any of these? Like site nav ones, or are these all navigation? Here we go. Tab component. Okay, so that's pretty good. Let's come back to that. Gov.uk ones. Okay, so these are all more utility-based ones. That's fine. Oh, there's a link to that podcast I just linked to, the one I was listening to the other day on the ViewComponent website, which is viewcomponent.org. So you can check that out. There's a bunch of other ones on there. Okay, so the libraries that exist seem to be utility based, and then these ones are framework. So what do you get from a framework? Again, I'm assuming this is utility based. They perform functions rather than help you style stuff. Because again, I'm just sort of I think we might have looked at this before, but I can't remember. But I was looking sort of like the bootstrap of the view component world, because we looked at Tailwind, which sort of had these like drag and drop, like copy and pastable sections. And again, I guess that's just not practical for view component because everyone's logic is so specific to their app. But you could help define a structure for people. So it could be, are you calling it site nav? Are we calling it navigation? Like best practice-y style things. Or maybe people aren't doing that at all. And maybe I'm thinking of it as the wrong way, which is like, these are utility based. So maybe I should just be building a partial for that. But my understanding is that everything would be a view component. But maybe I'm thinking of it the wrong way. Did it say there was examples of demo repository? Okay, let's see what the demo repository's got. Okay, it's only using the view component for like small elements. Okay, so maybe we just do this old school. Maybe we just put a partial in and sprinkle the view components out. So let me try and explain what I'm asking. I think navigation would be all types of navigation components, whereas I think what I'm sort of asking is like, does the entire site header sit inside a site component and everything cascades down within it? So let's say, okay, that doesn't feel great. But guess like site navbar would get you there, I guess. And then also, I guess that's the namespace, is it? When you're actually in here, admin events. Okay. In here, it would be like nav. And then in here, is it? Let's do this how we want to use this. Okay. And so that's the start of a component. So this is in like as opposed to having a partial called. Let's do it the other way then, where we would have I guess it would be in like what are you getting here now? Shared or don't you get a folder by default anymore for like shared stuff? It's shared, and there was another one that people used that I always see used. Let's just use shared for now. No, we'll just use the same structure. So like and then we could have okay, so in here we would have well, I don't know what we would have because we haven't done it yet, but something like this. It is nav the element, isn't it? Yeah, okay, cool. Right, so then something. Really matter what it is. In here, and then in here, have something, but that something is component based. Okay, cool. So then on the layout, here, yeah, I mean, let's just assume it's going to be on all pages for now. Let's yeah, whatever. These names always come back to bite you, but I just want to move really quickly. So in here, we can then have then that can render I think that should produce something. Site, it's got navbar, to app views. Oh, so because we're in header, we don't get the listed one as a freebie? Oh, this thing always covers that up. So I don't know if you can, no, because it covers up as I grow it. So it is there, but it's under the thing. Let's just wrap that in something real quick, just to move it over into the. Let's just plug it in the middle, just so we can see. Okay, cool. So we've got something there, something. So also in the header, what we can now also do is, where's our admin page where we do this? Yeah. Render. Site nav. Navbar. Anvar? Nice. All the right characters, none of the right. And it doesn't need anything because we haven't given it anything. but we also haven't given it the class correctly. So we can say that page was. That probably needs to inherit from something. Okay, so great, and that's something component based. Okay, so we can actually see that one. So one's in the middle, but that's just so we wasn't bumping into our little debugging thing. Okay, both work. Great. We can spit stuff out on the screen. Let's start taking a look into the pros and cons of this then. So in here, is the difference where we would start needing to add logic. So you can stay with a single use partial until you actually need to decide something within it, because otherwise you're just formatting things which you don't necessarily need view components for. Or is it more like React, where it's like you can make a call to sprinkle React components through a page, or you can just be like, right, we're going to build the page in React and everything within it is nested within, like the page itself is a component, or a huge chunk of it is, and everything else nested within it falls down. Like, is that just a decision we make as the app developers, or is there a guidance on how we actually approach that? View components in practice. View component is to UI what active record is to SQL. A conceptual compression. One of the big talking points in that podcast was the accessibility angle, making sure that each engineer is using accessible components because the components themselves are accessible. So you're not asking each individual engineer to understand the accessibility issues that they might face when doing something. So we have a user avatar component that accepts a user active record object and renders a app specific view components. The two types of components we write. Okay, so maybe this is it. We build our views using view components that tend to fall into two categories: general purpose and app specific. General purpose view components implement common UI patterns. At GitHub, we open source these as primer view components. App specific view components. App specific view components translate a domain object, often an active record model, into one or more general purpose components. For example, we have a user avatar component that accepts a user active record object that renders a primer. Organization extract general purpose view components. Just as view component itself was extracted from GitHub, our experience has shown that the best general purpose components are extracted from the GitHub application once they're proven helpful across more than one area. Our process typically follows the following steps: single use case component implemented in a single use case component implemented in the application. Component adapted for general use in multiple locations in the application. Component extracted to primer view components. Okay. Avoid one-offs. When to use view component for an entire route. View components have less value in single use cases like replacing a show view. Okay, great. This is exactly what I'm looking for. However, it can make sense to render an entire route with a view component when unit testing is valuable, such as for views with many permutations from a state machine. When migrating an entire route to use view components, we've had our best luck doing so from the bottom up, extracting portions of the page into view components first. Write view components that wrap web components, writing any custom JavaScript with Catalyst. I don't know what Catalyst is, but that's interesting. Okay. Prefer test against rendered content, not instance methods. So we need to get into testing today as well. Okay. Most view component instance methods can be private. as they will still be available in the component template. Okay. Prefer view components over view models. Okay, prefer view components over partials. Okay, great. Use view components in place of partials, as view components allow us to test reuse view code directly via unit test instead of through each place. Okay, so that would indicate that this. I have now closed the thing that actually shared header. We want this and not this, basically, which is great. This is really good docs. Like, this is really helpful to get our heads around how we're actually to approach this. Prefer view components over HTML generating helpers. Okay, yep. Avoid global state. The more a view component is dependent on global state, such as request params or the current URL, the less likely it is to be reusable. Avoid implicit coupling to global state, instead passing it to the component explicitly. Thorough unit testing is a good way to ensure decoupling from global state. Avoid inline Ruby in view component templates. Okay. Pass an object instead of 3 object attributes. View component should be passed individual. View component should be passed individual object attributes unless 3 or more attributes are needed from the object, in which case the entire object should be passed. Okay, fair enough. Avoid database queries. Great. Okay, that all makes a lot of sense and is super useful. That's really good. Do we want to use this primer thing? Like, can we just use that too? What was in it? I sort of got to pay attention because I was sort of looking at what it was. So this is the storybook version. We go back to the. It's got button. Oh, are these the, okay, a blank slate component, okay. Border box component. Box component. This is, so this alone is sort of is the, it's not the bootstrap of view component, but it's sort of like that one section of bootstrap that gave you all of the handy bits of utility stuff. It doesn't seem to be quite as wide ranging. I don't know. It's got, okay, deprecated. That's not one. So detailed. So do these come with the JavaScript to use them? Getting started. Okay, and how active is this repo? I mean, it's GitHub's UI, so I'm presuming it's pretty active. Okay, that wasn't a link to the. How do you actually get to the Git? Where's the GitHub repo? Here, GitHub. Primer view commits. Okay. Okay, this library is under active pre's 1.0 breaking changes are likely in patch releases. Interesting. Okay. I guess you could kind of. Sorry, I'm just clicking around in here to see. Make the font size a bit bigger for the stream. Sort of clicking around in here to see if there's anything scary. I mean, I guess you get a bunch of free stuff, and if you're willing to dive around in here. Okay, I'm super interested in that. Maybe we come back and add that in. Or do we have to make the commitment earlier on because it has like buttons and drop downs, which would be super helpful. How tied is everything to GitHub's UI? But they would have the accessibility stuff handled, which I really like. So let's take a look at a drop down. Like, what's the actual markup that comes out? Oh, super basic. That's good. Navigation, tab component. Okay, so these are other types of component. Like content, a counter. Oh, okay, so you get color schemes, like primary, secondary. That's kind of Bootstrap-esque as well. Okay, so we'd want to decide pretty quickly if we want to tie ourselves to a library or not. So like if you build a site and you really lean into Bootstrap, you're tied to Bootstrap, like you're sort of going along. Then you have a choice. You either completely break and you're like, right, we're going to support it up to version 3. I worked on a code base where we were like, right, we built a bunch of Bootstrap work was done, and then we started deviating and we're like, right, we're going to go to the next version, or are we going to head off in this other direction? And a decision was made. It was like, no, we're not going to upgrade to the next version. We are we're going to be able to fix any bugs or anything that come back because we'll look at the new version but have to do it manually, and then we're going to go off in this other direction. Whereas we could have said, yeah, we're going to stick with Bootstrap and follow their path through. So I think that is a decision we'd probably want to make pretty early, but this is super useful to know that this exists. What was the other one that wasn't Primer then? Resources. So that's Primer. Gov.uk was Polaris. Polaris ViewComponents is an implementation of the Polaris design system, which I've never heard of, but that might be cool. Let's go take a look at that. Oh, it's Shopify. Okay, cool. So we've got GitHub and Shopify throwing engineers at stuff, which is good. And there is presumably a bunch of components somewhere. Okay, cool. And even this, like, would you want to tie your app to Polaris or to Primer? That's a decision you could make. You could do both. I guess that would get really confusing. So you probably don't want to do that, but both are under active development. Okay. I guess you sort of want to see which one more closely resembles yours. So is there a storybook for this one as well? Just hoping there'd be like a quick Polaris ViewComponents. Great. Okay. Lookbook. Look, there's always 15 versions of everything. Okay, so lookbook is different to storybook. Again, if you use one of these off-the-shelf components, you might just get a bunch of accessibility benefits, but you also get the downside of tying yourself to the repo, to the set of components. But good on these companies for making it available to us if we want to use it. All right, let's come back to those because that's we haven't even built our first one yet. So we want something component based. Okay, let's put some logic in here, and we can say that we want. I'm just trying to remember how the hell to use this now. So we have a site nav, navbar component, and we probably want that to take a user. I would assume. I'm hoping. And if the user is, we could sort of do at the moment the assumption that we're using devise. I think devise has this notion of current underscore user, where that you either get the user that's signed in or you get nil. So for us, we could say, right, well, actually the default is going to be nil. But what you could also do is you could, if you needed to have like a I don't know, you could have some sort of representation of that if you needed to, and then pass in a logged in user, however you're doing it. I think we could just follow the devise way. So this will now fail. So our page will now break. Yeah, because we're not passing user in. So we actually need to come to where that's rendered. And then we can say the user for the navbar is the current user. And we passed in as nil, I think, but this should now still load. And so we can then... Right, so what did those docs say? They said if there's less than 3 things that you need to pass in, less than 3 attributes, pass them in individually. If there's more than that, just pass in the object. So let's do ours incrementally. Let's do this as a kind of an example. So let's say we just want first name to start with. So we actually don't need the whole user, because at this point we think we're only going to say hello first name. So at this point, we can do... I don't even know if we have first name one user. Let's go take a look if we've got first name one user. No, we just have name. We got this whole thing. We just have name because we wanted to not tie ourselves into having... I'm sorry, I think... we don't even have a name. It's just we don't even care what their name is. Okay, we probably want to ask for their name. Right, that's a bad example. Sorry, I just assumed we had collected their name, but we haven't covered sign up. This is the fun part of the stream, people, where we don't plan anything out. In that case, we can pass in user because all we actually care about is, are they signed in? I mean, I suppose we could do something like this, but then we could pass in current user dot present, and then you could just use this as like, you could argue that you're passing in less to the component. You're just passing in one Boolean value rather than an entire user. I think, to be honest, we're fine just passing in the user because the navbar is always going to get so complicated that you're going to need it. Okay, so I was hoping we could build that out incrementally, but whatever. It didn't come to pass. So that's passing in a current user. I can swap this back to user. Fine. Okay, we can't do their name, but let's see if we can spit out. Email. Let's try test123 example.com. Okay, amazing. Now, what we really want to do is add some tests, because that is what the value of this is. So how do we do that? View components admin events. Okay. So we want to do spec components, site nav. Again, no idea if these are good. I wonder if, like, I'm assuming we just namespace all of the generic stuff. So when the view component docs were talking about app specific, then generic, do we treat like I'm guessing we would just want to namespace all the generics and treat everything else as app specific, or would it want to be the other way around? So this could be navbar spec. Right, now we are in it because I have no idea what we're doing now. So how do you write an rspec test for a view component? Testing. Okay. Sort of just looking to see if there's like an aspect. Okay, yes. Okay, thank you. I thought there was because we looked at this, but I was like, oh no, do I have to just do this manually? Right. Okay. So have we done a bunch of this setup? So view component test helpers. I feel like might have helped ourselves out when we did this earlier. No, we didn't. Okay, fine. So to use aspect, add the following. So in Rails helper, we want to add in the view component test helper. So let's go to Rails helper and let's close that. So we've got some action text stuff. Loads of fun stuff there. So we've got devise test integration helpers. Okay. So let's add in our requires. We've got capybara already. I don't even know if we've got that far. Have we got any feature tests? System tests? Yes, we've got system tests. Okay. We have got capybara working. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we've got capybara. Well, and then at the bottom of our aspect config block, I think we can add these. Great, okay. To access device controller helper methods in tests, add the following. Device test controller helpers, do we already have these? And what do they give us? To add devices controller helper methods. What do they give us? A concurrent user, I guess they would give us. Specs created by the generator have access to test helpers like render inline, for example. Aspect describe example component type component. Use component previews. View component preview paths. I am going to add this in because I don't know why I wouldn't want that. Okay, so we've already got config include device test integration helpers. Type component. Okay, well this groups all of the component ones together rather than just grouping the device ones together. Or each type component request controller request. Okay, fine. Okay, so then if we just lift this out, plonk that in our test, what do we get? So describe site nav. Navbar. Component, it renders component, render inline, describe class, new. So here. What does this do? Hello. Oh, I guess that's the block for yield. Whatever is like in the content. I don't think we have anything in there yet. So can I just put a blank string in there? Expect rendered component to have. Is that example.com? I have no idea if I'm in the right ballpark here, by the way. I'm really just feeling my way. Hello in the chat. How's it going? We're fumbling around. Testing view components. Hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are in the world. Okay, wow, that actually totally worked. Wait, so... And so let me just break that test and just check that it's not a false positive. Right, okay. Okay. Great. So... Wait, where's did rendered component come from? Is that just magic? Does render inline just generate you a magic thing? Specs created by the generator have access to test helpers like render inline. So is there like a list of test helpers, or can we see what they do? Let's go take a look at what they do. So that's Primo ViewComponents. Just going to check the code. Let's go take a look at what we get. Testing is, oh yeah, testing I think is my weakness too. And that's even things that I've done before. Like it's like, oh, okay, I forgot to do this. So, okay, test. Can we get access to the test helpers in here? With preview paths, with preview root, with preview controller, with custom component path. So are these with generate sidecar with new cache? All right, okay, so these are all different things that we can pass. Okay, Rails test. Oh. I'm just sort of looking at where that stuff comes from. Let's take a look at like render inline. Oops. Just in the actual repo itself. Okay, why can't I search this? Search. So presumably render inline isn't constructed like that. But content test array 0 when content already set. So where does render inline actually happen? So I'm basically looking to just check my awareness of like what this is doing. I mean, it works, so great. It's a freebie, but it feels very implicit to have this suddenly appear. Whereas like what in React testing library, enzyme, one of those two, you can sort of do like it would maybe be more like this. So maybe this would be rendered component, and then render inline would then return the rendered thing, and then you can say expect rendered component, but it's visible in the test where that's come from. Whereas here that doesn't seem to have happened. Rendered component just seems to be magic. So what happens if we do just a thing? This. You've been doing a lot of C. Oh wow, a huge respect for doing C programming. I have never ventured in that direction, but it always seems very daunting. So well done. Lots of respect for getting that done. Right. So does this now work? Like basically, is this just returning a value and it happens to return it to? No. Okay. Oh, but it did. Oh, it did work. It's just that my false breaking of the test didn't work. Okay. Great. Okay. Okay. That's it. So this makes more sense to me. So render inline is a helper that just spits out a rendered version of the class. Great. And now we're assigning that value to a something that we've just made, render. If we don't do that, we're then setting the expectation on that thing that we've made. So render expected to have that. That's the output of this function. But if we don't do that, we get a magic one called rendered component. And that magic one, maybe it's not magic. I mean magic in the sense that I don't know where it comes from. And now that has failed. Oh, because I undid a load of stuff. My test failure, so this should now pass. So let's see if we can search for rendered component in that code base, just so I can see where that's getting done. Okay, here we go. So this looks more like it. Rendered component. Right, okay, so it's on ViewComponent test helpers. Is that what we imported into our Rails helper? ViewComponent test helpers here, yep. Okay, so when we have a page method which outputs the rendered component. But there's a reader on that, so presumably, even if we do this, that still works, because this is assigning what's coming out of here. I'm assuming, I'm totally guessing, to render, but I'm assuming that rendered component is still just accessing the same thing, so this should still pass. I think you can also, thank you in the chat, I think you can also expect page to test if your component rendered out to the page, as it might not render for certain conditions. Okay, so that's so JA on the YouTube chat. So I think you can also expect page test if your component rendered. So, but that is that within this spec helper, or do you mean from a system test one level up to test that it rendered? We do that in here. And page comes from... But won't page always have rendered it because it's adding it to a capybara node here? So if we do, so it's like page to have text. So we expect this one to pass as well. Great, okay. But if we add logic to... Aren't these the same? No, because one's wrapped and one's just... They're not the same because one's wrapped in a capybara node simple object. Okay, I might have totally got the wrong end of the stick there. Apologies if I have. Okay, cool. Render inline. Other request. Okay, so this is stuff we can do. Okay, this is all really good. Okay, so right, let's get something built. So I told you I've got to go to my sister's later. So we're gonna get this working. Let's get some output. Let's use the magic one. If they're gonna give us the magic, let's just use the magic. And I guess we don't need that block at all at the moment. Just remember that that's how we pass content in. Oh, damn it. That passes. Great. Okay, so. Oh, and then we didn't do our inverse spec. Okay, so with a user, It doesn't need to, the component doesn't know that it's a signed in user or not. God, we haven't set up our naming stuff for these tests. I say that every stream. So generally you would have a naming so that all your contexts match, but we're not doing that. So this user, we want to be in here. And we don't want to render this component. So it like, again, this isn't actually the final test we want. But here we could say, we don't really care about the email address for now because we actually want to not, we don't care about that. We're not going to put the email address in. But, and again, this is a fairly rubbish test anyway. Does this work? Does this pass? Just so we can say we've got both sides of that email for nil class. Yeah, so we need this to know that it might not have a user. Great, and so we could, visually, we could do something different. We could say if user else, and which is probably, C gives you a notion of how Ruby actually works. I don't even know how Ruby works at writing Ruby at the Ruby level, alone understanding how it works under the hood. I do always find it really useful whenever you read those. I'm joking, but like I do find it useful when you read those blog posts and people are like, hey, here's why. There was one recently which was like when you call like .map with I don't know, something, and it was giving you like this the C view of what is actually happening, the lower level view in C. It was really interesting. So yeah, I totally see that, and it's something I should really want to look into, but. And then we don't need that safe navigator if we have our user. Right, okay, so now we have a view component. It has some logic. We have tested that logic, so that's pretty great. So now we know if we're going to break it. Like and we've learned a bit about the helper methods that it gives us, and we can refresh this here. We can then open this page again in a private tab, and we should get here sign in, which would be a link or whatever. And on this one, we get the email address. So super simple, basic logic, but it's there and we've done it. All right, let's build a real nav bar. Let's get into a bit more CSS of it all and like actually make it a nav bar with a little tiny bit of logic, but with some navigation. Okay, so let's get rid of the partial version of this that we were talking about really early on. That in here and in here. Yeah, this can go. Let's back up to our components. So in here, and then take out the call to do that. So we have made a partial, but the which maybe we don't even need to do. Maybe, yeah, maybe that's just a bad habit as well. If someday you have an intrigue about how Ruby works, I recommend reading the book The Well-Grounded Rubyist. It's not a book to learn Ruby, it's about understanding how it works. It really explains very well the basics and how and why they were created and how. Okay, that's a totally good recommendation. I'm going to chuck that in. The Well-Grounded Rubyist. All right, I'm going to chuck a link to that in the YouTube description for this video for anyone who wants to take a look. And there was an interesting post going around this week. Did you see about Rails is not built on Ruby? I think was like the provocative title. And I've started reading it and then I got called away. But the basic premise, I think, was active support's monkey patching of Ruby means that when you're working in Rails so often, the things that you end up doing aren't Ruby. I mean, they are Ruby, but like you're not working with the language like standard libraries and stuff like that. You're actually using active support a bunch. I just feel like I have to go back and reread it in detail, but like that seems fine if you're aware of it. Like most, I mean, any like Rails engineer I know would know sort of the difference. Like, and if maybe they wouldn't know the difference, but like they would be like, oh, okay, well I know I've got active support available, but maybe I'm writing a Ruby script where I don't. But I know I then just have to go and look up the other thing. I don't think it's like, I guess it would be really, I guess maybe the argument is for learners and people beginning on their Rails Ruby journey, not ever getting that understanding. They could suddenly be asked to write a Ruby script and be like, oh, well, I'll just do this. And I would definitely do that. Like I would definitely forget what was in active support and have to be like, I would get an error and be like, oh, well, that's weird. And then I would just Google it and be like, oh, okay, well, that's not in Ruby, and I would just then be like, okay, well, I just have to look at how to do it in Ruby. So cool article, like a good thing to highlight. I think bit of a provocative title. Like I think you've got to have a title like that to get people to read your shit, which is fine by me. It's, get that anger going. I got to start naming the videos on this stream more more controversially. A Ruby creator uploaded a video to YouTube lately. It was a tutorial on how to create a basic app. I was so stunned on how. Oh, so it was just the app was just Ruby, as opposed to Rails. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the size and scope of problem you're solving as well. Like, if you're starting with Rails, you're usually just trying to get your actual business app logic over the finish line. Like you're like, right, I need this, I need this, I need this. Like I need all of these things, and I think I'm gonna need this, and this. I'm willing to take a large framework because I think I'm gonna go and build something that needs it. Again, if you're a learner, maybe you're bringing a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but I don't know. They've done a lot of work in Rails since like 5, I guess, which seems to be like giving you options when you start Rails to really get that stuff out of your way. So anyway, come on, Max. All right, we're gonna make this. We're gonna have an actual real live nav bar. Okay, so let's. Right, so we did side loading of these for the SAS files, I think. Yeah, okay, great. So now we can have a new file here, which is .sas. So what I was actually thinking, this is, okay, so I'm immediately going to go off on another tangent, but I think this one is relevant, which is in the podcast where Joel Hawksley was talking about ViewComponent, and they were talking about React and things. One of the things that I thought about was the SAS class naming. And at the moment, what we could do here is we could say, right, we're in site navbar, and we're like, right, okay, so we basically want to namespace our CSS to this file. And I, in the past, have used like the BEM syntax for that. So that's like the, that might be site. I mean, it might be site nav, navbar. 'Cause So what do we have on these, for example? Do we have orders, order list item, admin, order list item? Right, okay. So I've namespaced admin, but not orders. So it's not admin orders order list item. Okay, fine. So this is site nav, nav bar. Do any? No, okay. So I don't really like that because it will just bother me. Site nav, nav bar. You're basically just trying to get this block component namespace to this component. Again, some of them are prefixed with like M for module or C for component or something like that. It's just a naming strategy. And then you could say like avatar or whatever. So that's the block that you're in, the element you're styling, and then you might have okay, so components folder is using ViewComponent, which is this is a good recap. So we have a components folder because we're using ViewComponent, and ViewComponent is the library that GitHub use to build their front end. And it is, instead of using partials, you can sort of think of it this way as, instead of using partials, you actually build a component, and that component has a view, and it has a class, a set of logic. So it creates a class for you, and you can then run a unit test over that individual component. So for example, the test that we've run is we've passed in a user, and we want to know if I can get to the code, and we want to know if that user has, if we pass it in and it has an email, we show it. And if they don't have a user, then we don't show it. But all of that test is about just that single component, and we can nest them sort of infinitely. So we can have a component that might represent a whole page, or we could have just the navbar component, and then that could contain individual nested components, and each one would be unit tested. So you are only ever working with these small units of user interface, and then you build them back up. And the advantage is that they are more reusable than partials because you don't have shared global state within them. So you're always passing your, I mean, you can do that with partials, but you're passing your dependencies in, and also that you can unit test them as a Ruby class, and you don't have to, in a partial, have a separate view model or anything like that, or a page class or anything like that. So it's all built in. Hopefully that is a good overview of what we've been looking at in the last little while. So by default, the CSS classes don't come like that, but you can configure ViewComponent to do that. So they call it, so you can have them appear here alongside, but you can also have them in a little folder of the same name. So you could have a little folder called navbar and have, they call it sidecar assets. And there's documentation for that on the ViewComponent stuff. It must be in here. So this is what we did. We added in a little loop. So in our build, a SaaS build pipeline, it would grab them out from here as well. And there's stuff in here about like sidecar. Yeah, here. So you can see that they've got different folder structures for how you want them basically. It's super configurable. And I was sort of wondering so I've used React CSS modules. So let's say you're working on a React component called avatar, and you create a component, you create something within it, an element within it, and you say class. So you're in a component called avatar. This is just pseudocode, and this is pseudo React code. And in here you have a photo. I don't know, whatever it is. So without doing anything, you can then go and write a CSS file that's like in the same directory, and that can include .photo. And I think it can include .photo. Yeah. So when the code is actually built and shipped, this is prefixed with something. So it's like the actual output of this component would be something like whatever, like it would come out as whatever you wrapped your component in. But in here, it would be like avatar dash photo, and this gets prefixed automatically, and the output CSS is also prefixed and added. So you can't clash namespaces across your components, because it doesn't matter how many times you use the class photo, when the code is actually rendered out, it's handling making that unique for you. So you never need to worry about it. So you can call your CSS classes in your components really sensible, low-level stuff, photo, thing, like button, whatever it is, and it knows that it's that it's going to be scoped to the component you're working in, even if that's nested within another component that has photo. That will always be nested. So I was kind of thinking, why can't we do the same thing for ViewComponents? So here we've got navbar.html, and so let's say in here I want to add in let's just add a div for now, and this is called photo. Okay, so what am I doing? So here we've got photo. Now in here, I can get rid of all this. This is just junk. So in here at the moment, I think this will, if I did this, this would still be a global CSS class called photo. So we could do so let's just hide that one for a second. So in here, just spit this out. We can go and check whether this is global or not. Maybe it already does this, in which case it will be amazing and my favorite thing ever. Okay, so we've got photo. Why haven't we got a CSS class called photo? Why haven't we got a CSS class called photo? Have we not got CSS on this page? Not a lot of CSS that we spit out at the moment. Oh, maybe we're not spitting out any CSS. Maybe we is this the first bit of CSS? No, we have, because we use it in the admin area. Oh, have I only added it to the admin layout? Style sheet application. I think everything else is out of our application, doesn't it? Yeah, on the it sounds interesting. GitHub uses this tool. I've linked in the YouTube video description. I've linked to and it's on the ViewComponent site as well. If you go to resources, there's some podcasts. I was listening to this Rails with Jason one, and it is their front end basically, GitHub. And one of the big things is I mentioned earlier was the accessibility stuff. So it's worth a listen just for the accessibility advantages you can get from this. Okay, so that's not what we... Okay, so why am I not getting my CSS loaded up when the rest of them are being loaded? When I go to my admin area here, where is that CSS coming from? Event list item component, and that is... I'm wondering if I built a separate admin CSS thingy. Okay, why am I not getting any CSS files coming through at all? seems... Okay. All the trick stuff. Inline. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. So you get the actual SAS files in it. Oh, that's super useful. That's all of the mapping stuff. Okay, great. This all makes sense. Where's my red box? Where's my red outline? Ended this time. It says new this time. Order this time. Okay, my new... Okay, like we're off on a slight tangent, but let's not worry about that. That's fine. Everything in here is loaded. This hasn't loaded. But it's got the same file extension. Can we put something in here that's global? To see if it's being picked up at all. So we can do background color, blue. Just make that important. We should see everything turn blue if this file is being included. Which hopefully it is. Okay. Interesting, it's not. So we're missing something. Okay. Okay. Do these need to be added individually to application.styles? Which is then in JavaScript. Not this one, not this one. Is it in assets, style sheets? Okay. What I'm trying to find out is there somewhere where I thought the whole point was that we didn't need to add these in, it was just going to loop over and grab them all out. Where is... in components, go and get them all. Aha. No. Do they have to be suffixed with component in the name? Aha. Okay. Right. So it's navbar. Wait, do all of them do that? Is that a thing? That's fine. Okay, so the reason it's not loading is it's not suffixed with underscore component. Okay, great. So the code told us where to go. This is called component, but are all of the ones like in here called component? Yes. Okay, great. So everything is suffixed with component. Right. Okay, as long as that's the rule, I find that makes... Okay. Apart from this one. Okay, but this one seems quite specific. Icon. Okay, so these ones aren't, but I'm assuming it's because these are... Okay. Is there a naming section in here? Component ends named in dash component. Fine. Like if that's the convention, that's the convention. Get it together, Max. All right, cool. So component names end in component. Okay, great. So now this will be wrong. In fact, we can just do this site-wide, can't we? That. Great. Okay, so now we should have, I think it's going to be a giant blue background and a red box. Okay, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous, but it works. All right, let's get rid of our stupid blue background. My point was here we have a global, so now we should just have a red box. I think this is a global CSS state. So in here, due to our fancy thing, we should have navbar component photo. And that means that if we were to just add something to a layout, for example, and just call it photo, like if just in here we just put in says, am I in a red box? The answer should be yes, I think. Yeah, okay, great. Ideally, because we know that this CSS file, the output from this, we only want it to touch the CSS for this component. Is there a place in the build pipeline where we could say, right, well, if here, if you're one of the classes being imported here, yeah, it's gonna get. I guess that's really tricky because you would need to mutate the names of the classes, which, yeah, but Sass would make that really hard. You could probably do it if you like sort of pinky promise not to dynamically generate some certain stuff in Sass. I wonder how CSS modules does that on the React side, because you're still using Sass in there, so it must. I guess it just transforms the rendered output potentially, so it doesn't affect the Sass file, it affects the built version. No idea. I actually have no idea how it does that. Okay, that would be a really, really interesting thing to go and look into. I'm not going to look into it right now, but what we know is that we're using a Sass file that is named and placed next to the component we're associating it with, but the output remains global. So it's only us as the authors of the code that are setting the namespace. So I'm using site navbar. Again, you could sort of put component in the class name, but I mean, they get a bit long. But that would help us. So we can take this out. And we can take that bit of layout code out as well. This can go. Oh, scratch, delete it. So here, all right, so let's start shaping the component. So let's say we want let's just give it a line that we can see. Do these, we start to put these next to each other, do these do like hot reloading? No, I wonder if we could get that set up. Oh, they take flipping ages to reload if we change them as well. All right, cool. So we can close this. Yeah, so we can say right, okay, we can take this out. I wonder, do they go as far as having an image? Primer one? Yes. So they go as far as having a component for an image. So you really are talking like swapping out low level. I'm assuming that this stuff, like having colorblind stuff and high contrast, is that handled within the image component potentially? It'd be really interesting to. Okay, I'd love to get into this. I think I'm also willing to say it might be worth us committing to this as well, because this seems really interesting. Whether or not to lazily load the image, which is really helpful. Performance of system arguments. All Primer View components accept a standard set of options called system arguments, mimicking the system-styled API used by Primer React. Under the hood, system arguments are mapped to Primer CSS classes, with any remaining options passed to Rails content tag. Okay, I don't know what. To apply different values across responsive breakpoints, pass an array with up to 5 values in the order default, small, medium, large, extra large. To skip a breakpoint, pass nil. Okay, so. Right, so this is the Tailwind syntax. Okay, and what's that doing? So, start under the hood, system arguments are mapped to Primer CSS classes with any remaining options passed around. HTML attribute system arguments include most HTML attributes, animation, border. Okay. Oh, interesting. They have like a subset. This is interesting because this is what I was interested in is like having a subset of the Tailwind stuff. Like I don't want the whole thing to come over because it seemed like a lot of heavy lifting. But if there's this stuff available, that's interesting. Interesting. Okay, I think Primer seems like a really seems like something I might want to investigate next week and kind of attach this repo to. Okay, so we are using this, and it's where's that border coming from? We haven't got any reset on our body, I assume. It's got no CSS doing anything at all. There are a few like I think still a few like reset normalize CSS thingamajiggies. It's like a GitHub version of that. Of course, by searching for GitHub, you just find all of the code on GitHub, which isn't useful in any way. A combination of CSS reset and normalize. Modern normalize, minimal CSS reset, CSS init. Oh man, I need to see what the most recent version of all of this stuff is. Like, is this all? This used to be a thing back in the day, but I'm assuming this is all. Is this still kept up to date? But I haven't done this in a little while. No. Okay. Fair enough. Maybe we just need to reset stuff. Or we could just do it ourselves on... I don't even know what that is. Is it margin or padding we're trying to get rid of? Just want that to go edge to edge. I'll try and find a reset. All right, we've drifted past 12, and I have got to wrap this up. Okay, maybe it's padding. Just let me just see. This is getting picked up. Oh, great. And okay, now this one's getting picked up. Okay, I'm not going to worry. That one need... I don't know. I don't think so. I think that should be being picked up. Oh, well. Okay, we'll figure it out. Okay, what did we take a look at in this stream? Let's do a quick recap. We took a look at adding a view component that has logic in it, writing a test for it, which we now have. We looked at whether we approach building entire pages in view component or whether we just build the individual components. We found the page on the on the view component. It says view components in practice. This was super helpful, highly recommended if you are taking a look at them. This had all of our answers in it for us, really well written, really easy to understand. We then built it, added all the test helpers, wrote a test, and then we're starting to format it and have run out of time, sadly. But we learned loads along the way, which is really the most important thing on a Sunday morning. And I will try and this afternoon go back and finish up the Git branch and tidy all that stuff up. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Super helpful, amazing as always. And I think next week we might try and tie ourselves into that primer repo and also do more with view components because we're going to put a front end on this thing and try and make it look nice as well at the same time. Have an amazing week, and I'll try and do a design one during the week if I think about it, but to be honest, I probably won't, but maybe it'll happen. And other than that, I will see you all next Sunday. Have an amazing week. Goodbye.